My wife walked through the front door wearing a dress I'd never laid eyes on before. She looked me dead in the eye, let out a cold laugh, and told me she was heading out on a date. "Try not to get too jealous," she added, flashing a smirk that felt like it had ice behind it. I probably should have lost it right then and there, but I didn't. Instead, I said something that made her stop in her tracks, mid-stride. And from that moment on, nothing was ever going to be the same. Not just for us, but for a whole bunch of people I hadn't even met yet. See, some secrets go deeper than just marriage. Some lies? They don't just break hearts, they can shatter lives. My name's Jack Bennett. I'm 46 years old, and for the past 17 years, I've run a little operation called Oceanic Quest Ventures, a scuba diving outfit right off the coast of Florida. I built it from the ground up after I left the Navy, teaching folks how to experience the world beneath the waves. Laura, my wife, handled all the numbers and office stuff while I dealt with the water. We had, or at least I thought we had, a strong marriage. 24 years of what I believed was mutual trust, love, and teamwork. But that Wednesday night flipped everything upside down. I was out in the garage scrubbing down my diving gear when I heard her shoes, heels, not sneakers, clicking across the kitchen floor. That caught my attention, because Laura hardly ever wore anything but sneakers around the house. When I stepped inside, I found her in front of the mirror, adjusting a sleek black dress I definitely hadn't seen before. It hugged her figure in a way that screamed not for book club. I grabbed a towel, wiped the salt water and grease from my hands, and asked, "Headed somewhere fancy?" She turned to face me, and that's when I saw it. That smile. But not the soft, warm one I'd fallen for years ago. This one was sharp, cool, and felt like it could slice a man in half. "I've got a date tonight," she said casually, like she was telling me she was running to the store. "Try not to be too jealous, Jack." Her words hit me like a rogue wave in rough seas. I stood there, towel still in hand, just watching the woman I'd shared my life with for more than 2 decades chuckle at the look on my face. And it wasn't a nervous chuckle, or the kind someone gives when they know they've messed up. No, it was pure amusement, like she was enjoying the shock. "A date," I finally managed to say. She nodded without a hint of shame, then picked up her purse and gave herself one last look in the mirror. "Don't wait up." I wanted to ask everything. Who was he? Where were they going? How long had this been going on? But instead of asking any of that, I heard myself say something that stopped her cold. "Should be fun explaining that to your sister tomorrow." She froze for just a second, her confidence taking a tiny stumble. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked. "Nothing," I muttered. "Have a good time." But it wasn't nothing, not by a long shot. Her sister, Melissa, lived just 3 blocks away, and she had a knack for showing up without warning. More importantly, Melissa had been asking some sharp questions about these so-called book club meetings Laura was always going to. Meetings that somehow happened every other week, even though the club only read 1 book a month. After Laura walked out, I sank into my recliner and just stared at the wall. 24 years of marriage, and she just casually dropped the fact that she was seeing someone else like it was no big deal. It wasn't even the betrayal that hurt the most. What really cut deep was how easy it seemed for her. Like she could just toss everything away without a second thought. I poured myself a bourbon, neat, and started thinking. Being a dive instructor has taught me that panic is the quickest way to get yourself in trouble underwater. You've got to breathe slow, stay focused, make a plan. Turns out, those same rules apply topside too. By the time I finished that drink, I had a pretty good idea of what I needed to do next. The following morning, Laura acted like nothing had happened. She was humming in the kitchen while she made her coffee, asked if I'd seen the weather forecast, and even kissed me on the cheek before I left for work. If I hadn't seen her walk out the night before in that black dress, I might have thought I'd dreamed the whole thing. But I'm not one to imagine things. See, I'm a methodical guy. 19 years in the Navy and 14 more running a business will do that to you. You learn to keep records. So when I got to Oceanic Quest Ventures that morning, I started digging. First stop, our joint bank account. Laura always said she was better with money, so she handled most of the finances. Turns out, what she was really good at was hiding stuff. I found 3 cash withdrawals in the last month, each one for exactly $320. Then I checked the credit card statements. There were dinner charges at restaurants I'd never heard of, a hotel in Fort Lauderdale, and a payment to a place called Cozy Lingerie Shop. Now, I'm trained to keep calm under pressure. Diving can be deadly if you lose your cool. But looking at those receipts gave me the same feeling as nitrogen narcosis. Everything felt strange, too clear, and too chaotic all at once. I got on the phone with our bank and ordered full statements going back 6 months. After that, I headed to the hotel in Fort Lauderdale. Had a little chat with the front desk clerk, a young woman named Rachel. She recognized Laura's picture the second I showed it to her. "Oh, Mrs. Bennett," she said. "She's been here a bunch of times with her friend Daniel. Such a sweet couple." Daniel. That name dropped like an anchor in my gut. I knew exactly who he was. Daniel Mercer had been one of my dive students about 4 years ago. He was a mid-40s real estate guy, freshly divorced, always trying to flirt with the women who came in for lessons. I ended up banning him from the dive shop after I caught him sneaking photos of female customers in their wetsuits. And now here he was, taking photos of my wife in a hotel room, I'd bet. Back at the dive center, I reached out to some old Navy buddies. Luis Alvarez, for one. These days he worked at a private investigation firm up in Orlando. We'd saved each other's skin back in the Gulf, so I figured he owed me one. "Jack, good to hear your voice, brother," he said when he picked up. "What's going on?" I told him everything. The date, the hotel, Daniel Mercer. Luis sat quietly while I poured it all out, then gave me a piece of advice that would shift the course of everything. He said, "Don't confront her yet." According to him, folks who cheat act like trapped animals when cornered. They'll cover their tracks and vanish in a heartbeat. He told me I needed proof, pictures, recordings, money trails. He said to get my facts straight before making a move. I told him this wasn't some military mission. Luis looked me dead in the eye and said, "Isn't it, though? She's already launched an attack on your marriage, and you're standing there unarmed." He told me it was time to gear up. So that night, I set up a little camera in the living room. Not to snoop, but to protect myself. If Laura was going to tear apart our marriage, I wasn't about to let her drag my name through the mud too. She rolled and laid again that night, saying her book club went long. I just smiled and asked her how the conversation went. She said it was a fascinating topic, something about betrayal and relationships, without even looking me in the eye. I almost laughed at the twisted irony, but instead, I kissed her goodnight and went to bed. I lay there in the dark, wide awake, thinking through what I'd do next. Starting tomorrow, I'd begin collecting the evidence that would finally blow the lid off this whole mess. Luis's digging turned up results quicker than I thought. By Friday, he uncovered something that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't just infidelity. Laura had been quietly siphoning off our money. "Jack, you better sit down for this," Luis said over the phone. "Your wife took out a second mortgage on your dive shop, 180 grand, and she forged the paperwork." The room spun. "That can't be. I never signed anything," I said, stunned. "She had help," Luis replied. "Turns out Daniel Mercer, who works over at Shoreline Properties, was in on it. They've got contacts with some shady mortgage brokers. Looks like someone doctored the paperwork." I tightened my grip on the phone. "Where's the money?" "Gone," he said. "Wired to an offshore account just last month." "Jack, they're planning to vanish." That same evening, Laura came through the door with shopping bags from high-end stores. She'd bought fancy luggage, luxury clothes, and jewelry we could never afford on honest earnings. The same woman who used to clip coupons like it was a sport was now spending like there was no tomorrow. "Something special going on?" I asked, watching her hold up a silk dress. "A woman deserves something nice now and then," she said. "While you've been obsessed with your little diving gig, I've had to fend for myself." My little diving gig. The very business she mortgaged behind my back. "Looks pricey," I said evenly. She gave a shrug. "We can swing it. Business is good, right?" I wanted to explode right there, but Luis's voice echoed in my head. "Build the case first." So I smiled and nodded like nothing was wrong, pretending I was just the clueless husband, even as everything I cared about started falling apart. That night, I called my old friend and Navy buddy, Ethan Kim, now an attorney. I laid it all out for him, and his response came sharp and fast. "Jack, that's fraud. Serious stuff. Criminal fraud," he said. "We need to freeze your assets right away and get the authorities involved." "What about Laura?" I asked. "What about her?" he said flatly. "She's committed fraud, forgery, and theft. That's prison time, my friend." By Sunday, I had court orders in hand, emergency freezes on all our accounts, and legal blocks on property transfers. But that wasn't the only surprise. Laura's mother, Margaret, gave me a ring that afternoon, her voice trembling. "Jack, Laura mentioned moving to Georgia with some new friend of hers," she said. "She wanted me to wire her 11 grand for some kind of business venture." It just didn't sit right. So I told Margaret everything, the affair, The money, Daniel. By the time we hung up, she was in tears, apologizing for her daughter's betrayal. I didn't raise her like this, Margaret said, heartbroken. What can I do to help? That's when I realized I had someone on the inside. That's when the pieces of my plan really started to fall into place. Monday morning came with a shock I didn't see coming. Luis called again, his voice tight. Jack, there's more. Laura's been talking to Detective James Carter over in Fort Lauderdale. They've had private meetings. That name hit me like a brick. Carter had a reputation, a few questionable cases, whispers about evidence vanishing and charges being dropped for the right price. You think he's crooked? I asked. I think your wife's been buying herself some cover, Luis said. If you'd gone to the local cops, Carter might have made sure the whole case disappeared. That explained why Laura was acting so bold. She thought she had a safety net. What do we do now? I asked. We go federal, he said. Crossing state lines with laundered money put it in the FBI's court. The local cops wouldn't matter anymore. That afternoon, I sat down with Agent Emily Diaz at a coffee shop a little ways out of town. I told her everything about the fake mortgage, the offshore accounts, Carter's involvement. She didn't say much, just took notes with this focused look on her face. Mr. Bennett, she said finally, you've just stepped into something a lot bigger than a bad marriage. What do you mean? I asked. Daniel Mercer and James Carter have already been on our radar for real estate fraud. Agent Diaz told me something I wasn't expecting, that Laura might have stumbled into something way bigger than just stepping out on me. Turns out, the feds have been building a case against a whole ring of dirty real estate agents and crooked officials involved in property theft and laundering cash. Laura and Daniel had unknowingly handed over the final puzzle pieces they'd been missing. We need you to keep playing it cool for a few more days, Diaz said. Can you manage that? I gave a quick nod. What happens to Laura? I asked. That's up to her, she said. Depends on how willing she is to play ball. That same evening, Laura casually mentioned she'd be heading out of town for a spa weekend with her girlfriends. She said she'd be gone from Thursday to Sunday. Sounds like a nice break, I replied, already knowing she'd be meeting Daniel to seal their little getaway plan. She looked at me, surprised I wasn't raising questions. You don't mind? I smiled. You've earned a little time to yourself, I said, keeping my voice calm. I watched her pack her fancy new luggage, stuffed with more than just clothes. I caught glimpses of what she thought I hadn't seen: account numbers, travel documents, flight info, and even a phony passport with her picture under someone else's name. Thursday morning, I gave her a kiss goodbye and stood at the window as she drove off. She thought she was heading toward a fresh start, but what she didn't know was that she was heading straight into the jaws of a federal investigation. As soon as her car disappeared down the road, I called Agent Diaz. She's in motion, I said. Whatever you've got planned, this is the moment. It's already underway, she replied. Mr. Bennett, stay close to your phone. Things are about to move fast. By Friday afternoon, Diaz got back to me with the final piece of the setup. Jack, we've tapped into messages between Laura and Daniel. They're planning to meet tonight, Seaside Grill Restaurant on Marina Avenue. They think they're toasting their new life, she added. That's 3 blocks from my mother-in-law's place, I said. Perfect, she replied. She told me they needed witnesses. People close to Laura who could see what was happening and testify if needed. So I gave Margaret a call and laid out the plan. Even after all we'd uncovered, her voice was steady. Jack, she said quietly, I've been thinking about this all week. If her father were still alive, he'd be devastated by what she's done. We raised her with values. Somewhere along the line, she threw them away. Margaret, I need you to call her. Ask her to dinner tonight. Tell her it's about something important to the family, I said. She'll smell a setup, Margaret warned. Not if you say you've been having chest pains and you want to see her before you get tests done. She'll come. That evening, I arrived at Seaside Grill early and found Margaret already seated, along with Laura's brother Kevin and his wife Anna. They looked uneasy, but they were committed. Laura believed she was walking into a family emergency. A health scare, maybe a heart issue. But when she walked through the doors at 7:45, what she actually walked into was a reckoning. She stopped cold when she saw me at the table, sitting with her family and a stack of manila envelopes. The smug smile she wore faded in an instant. Jack, what are you doing here? She asked, her voice wobbling. Take a seat, I said evenly. We need to talk. Mom? What's going on? Laura stayed standing, gripping her expensive handbag like it was a shield. Margaret spoke first. Laura, Jack has shown me some very serious things. Things you've been up to. I slid an envelope in front of each person at the table. Don't open them yet, I said. Let's hear what Laura has to say first. Say what? She said, her voice climbing. What is this? Where did the money come from, Laura? The luxury shopping? The getaway plan? I kept my voice low. The $180,000 you stole by forging my name on those loan papers. She turned pale right in front of us. That's absurd. You're overreacting again. Kevin couldn't wait. He tore open his envelope and let out a sharp breath. Laura, these are account statements. You really did this. I can explain, she started, but I raised a hand to stop her. You once told me not to be jealous when you were out with another man. I said loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. Well, I'm not jealous now. Just heartbroken that 2 decades of marriage meant so little to you. She froze, just locked up, realizing the truth had come crashing down. That's when Agent Diaz stepped up to the table, flashing her badge. Laura Bennett, you're under arrest for bank fraud, forgery, and conspiracy, she said. As the cuffs snapped around Laura's wrists, she finally looked at me. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I saw a flash of the woman I married. Jack, please. We can fix this. I shook my head. We could have. Before you chose to destroy everything we built. Saturday morning brought the final chapter in that mess. I was sipping coffee at Margaret's kitchen table when Agent Diaz called. Jack, she said, we've taken down 5 people in the ring, including Detective Carter. Your wife's cooperation led us to bank accounts in 3 different countries. What did she tell you? I asked. Everything, Agent Diaz said. Daniel Mercer was running a pretty sophisticated scam. They were targeting small business owners all over the Southeast. For years in the making before they landed on you. Margaret set her coffee down with a soft clink. Agent Diaz, how many families did they ruin? 21 so far that we've confirmed. Your daughter's testimony is helping us contact the rest. That made me feel sick to my stomach. Just picturing other guys out there, folks like me, who'd had their lives torn up by this whole web of lies. Family shredded, futures stolen. Then Agent Diaz added, there's something else, Jack. Daniel was planning something serious against you, trying to cover it up as a diving accident. The words hit the table like a dropped hammer. My wife, apparently, wouldn't go along with that part, which is why they rushed the financial theft instead. Silence fell over the room. I glanced at Margaret, whose eyes were welling up. She reached for my hand. She whispered that he was planning to seriously harm my son-in-law. Drain your accounts, make it look like a tragic accident. Laura would play the grieving widow and disappear with a new name, a new life, and all your money. I turned toward the window, looking out over the harbor where I'd spent 17 years building Oceanic Quest Ventures from the ground up. How close did they get? Daniel had already bought equipment that could have caused a serious accident with your scuba tank, she said. If you hadn't discovered the affair when you did, Jack, things could have ended very badly. Later that day, I went to visit Laura in the county jail. She looked small sitting there in that orange jumpsuit. Smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her hair was pulled back, her face was pale. Her eyes met mine, and there was no smugness left. I would never agree to a plan that would cause you serious harm, she said quietly. That's why I tried to tell you about the affair. I figured if you divorced me, maybe Daniel would back off. Leave you alone. You could have just told me the truth, I said. I was scared, she said, her voice cracking. Daniel said if I turned on him, things would get very bad for both of us. I know it doesn't make up for what I did, but I didn't know how to get out. I stared at her a long time, trying to see if any part of the woman I married was still in there. Maybe a flicker. Maybe not. They're saying you could get 14 years, I told her. I know, she nodded. But I'm going to testify against all of them. It won't fix what I broke, but maybe it'll help those other families. When I walked out of that jail, I felt something I didn't expect. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the start of something that looked like closure. At least she hadn't gone as far as causing serious harm. At least there was that. That evening, Luis called. Jack, the FBI recovered most of your money. They're freezing offshore accounts and working on getting all the funds back to the victims. You're saying I might actually come out of this whole? As whole as anyone can, he said. And Oceanic Quest Ventures? It's still yours. That fake mortgage got tossed, and your insurance is covering all the legal bills. You can rebuild. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could finally exhale. 3 months later, I stood on the deck of my boat as the sun rose over the Atlantic. Oceanic Quest Ventures was up and running again, stronger than before. In fact, I guess people liked the idea of giving their business to a guy who'd walked through fire and made it out the other side. Margaret had become an unexpected source of strength. She moved into Laura's old office at the dive center, handling calls, booking trips, keeping things steady. She helped fill the gap left by those 24 years of marriage, even if that marriage turned out to be more shadow than substance. "Jack, you have a visitor," Margaret called from the office window. I turned and saw a woman in her 32s walking down the pier, business suit, calm stride, but something familiar in her features. "Mr. Bennett, I'm Olivia Diaz," she said as she reached me. "Agent Emily Diaz is my sister. I run a nonprofit for victims of financial fraud." We shook hands. She had the same sharp look in her eyes as her sister. "What can I help you with?" "We're putting together a support network for the folks affected by Daniel Mercer's operation. 21 families lost everything. They need to hear from someone who made it through. Helping other victims." The idea caught me off guard, but it stuck. All those men out there had been through what I went through. The shock, the shame, the ache of not knowing what had been real. "What would that look like?" I asked. "Just showing up, telling your story, proving there's a road back." Some of these men, Jack, they're feeling overwhelmed and struggling right now. They think they failed. That same afternoon, I found myself sitting in a small room at a community center in Atlanta. 13 men. Ages ranged from maybe 34 to late 62s. Every one of them wore the same hollow look I used to see in the mirror. Olivia introduced me. "This is Jack Bennett. His wife was involved in the Mercer network, but he helped bring it down. He's here because he survived." The first man to speak was named Mark. "How did you know something was wrong?" he asked. "I was married 9 years. Never saw it coming. I didn't know," I told him honestly. "I got lucky. My wife slipped up. I had good friends and a few people in the right places. But mostly, I didn't let the betrayal shut down my thinking." Another man, Ethan, looked up from his lap. "They took my construction business, my house, my kids' college savings. Everything I built in 16 years gone. The FBI's recovered 73% of what was taken," I said. "You'll get a good chunk of it back." "But what about trust?" someone else asked. "How do you trust again? How do you believe in anyone after this?" Now that was the question. One I was still trying to answer myself. "You don't start with trust," I told the group. "You start with verification. You build trust one brick at a time, with people who prove themselves, again and again, through what they do, not what they say." After the meeting, Ethan walked over to me, quiet and thoughtful. "Jack, I heard your mother-in-law helped expose her own daughter. That couldn't have been easy." "No," I said, "but Margaret chose what was right instead of what was easy. That's the kind of person you can trust, someone who'll do the hard thing when it matters." That night, I called Margaret. I wanted to tell her how the meeting went. "Jack, I'm proud of you," she said. "You're helping those men find their footing again. Laura wrecked a lot of lives, but you're out there helping to rebuild them." "We're rebuilding them," I corrected her. "I couldn't do any of this without your help." And after I hung up, it hit me. That whole web of lies I'd been living in, this mess of deceit and betrayal, was being replaced by something new, something honest, a network of real support, grounded in truth and shared purpose. It felt like progress. 5 months after the arrests, I got a phone call that would spin my life in yet another direction. "Jack Bennett," the voice said. "This is Captain Rachel Turner, Coast Guard Investigative Service. We need your expertise on a case involving underwater evidence recovery." "What kind of case?" I asked. Daniel Mercer wasn't just a financial con artist. Turns out he was also involved in illegal activities using diving charters along the coast. "We need someone with your technical diving background and your investigative instincts." The irony of it made me laugh out loud. The same diving skills Daniel tried to ruin were now being used to take down the rest of his criminal empire. That afternoon, I met Captain Turner at the Coast Guard station. She pulled up some underwater footage, sealed containers stashed against artificial reefs. The very reefs I'd used to teach beginner divers for over 17 years. "We believe Mercer's crew used legit dive trips as cover," she explained. "They'd stash packages underwater, then pick them up later. We need someone who knows these dive sites inside and out, someone local divers trust." I studied the video closely. I recognized those sites. Hell, I'd taken families to some of them. The thought that smugglers were using my territory while I'd been teaching people about marine life made my skin crawl. When do we start? Over the next 3 weeks, I ran dual operations. On the surface, Oceanic Quest Ventures looked like any other dive company, running charters, giving lessons. But behind the scenes, I was working with the Coast Guard to map out suspicious activity underwater. We found 16 hidden stashes containing illegal substances and weapons. But the real breakthrough came when we discovered Daniel's personal dive logs. They'd been tucked into a waterproof container, tucked in tight behind a coral shelf. Inside, a detailed record of 4 years' worth of smuggling ops, who he paid off, which harbors were compromised, and what cops looked the other way. "Jack," Captain Turner said when we surfaced after that final dive, "this evidence is going to blow the entire coastal smuggling network wide open. You just helped solve crimes that stretch across multiple states." That evening, Margaret and I sat on the deck of the dive center, watching the sun melt into the water like fire into glass. "Your father would be proud," she said quietly. "You turned something awful into a reason to help others." "Laura's father, you mean?" "No, Jack. Your father. He raised a man who stands up for what's right, even when it's hard." I sat with that for a while. My dad had died when I was still in the Navy, before I started Oceanic Quest Ventures, before I met Laura. But maybe, just maybe, he'd have been proud of how I pulled myself through the wreckage. "Margaret," I said, "I've been thinking. I want to expand the business. Add a victim advocacy component. Maybe partner with law enforcement on marine investigations. There's more I could be doing." She smiled. "That sounds like your calling, Jack." 3 weeks later, the local paper ran a front-page story. The headline read, "Local dive instructor helps Coast Guard bust multi-state drug ring. Bookings doubled practically overnight. Turns out people like learning to dive from a guy who's walked through hell and come out honest on the other side." But more than the business success, I'd found something deeper, a sense of purpose I didn't even know I'd been missing. What nearly broke me had uncovered a part of me I hadn't seen before, a strength I didn't know I had. 1 year after Laura's arrest, I stood in a federal courthouse as her final sentence was read out loud. 14 years for fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. Daniel Mercer received a life sentence without parole. He was also convicted of planning serious crimes and involvement in drug trafficking. Corrupt to the core. Detective Carter, who had helped them cover it all up, got 25 years for corruption and tampering with evidence. Margaret sat beside me, her hand steady on my arm as the judge went through the charges. Her daughter had torn their family apart, but Margaret never once wavered from doing what was right. "The court recognizes that Mrs. Bennett's cooperation was instrumental in dismantling this criminal enterprise," Judge Franklin said. "However, the severity of these crimes requires substantial punishment." As Laura was led away, she looked back at us one last time. And I didn't see the woman I'd married, or even the stranger who betrayed me. I saw a person who'd made her choices and had to live with what those choices destroyed, including herself. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Agent Diaz approached us. "Jack," she said, "the asset recovery is complete. Between offshore accounts and seized properties, we've recouped 84% of what was stolen." "And the other 16%? I asked. "Gone. But this is the highest recovery percentage we've ever seen in a case this complicated." That afternoon, Margaret and I headed back to Oceanic Quest Ventures. The business had grown into something way beyond what I ever pictured during my marriage. We had 4 boats now, a full team of 7 certified dive instructors, and believe it or not, contracts with both the Coast Guard and the FBI for underwater investigations. As we sat on the office deck, watching the sun melt into the horizon, Margaret turned to me with that quiet, steady tone she uses when she's about to drop something big. "Jack, I've got something to tell you," she said. "I've been accepted into the Police Academy's Civilian Investigator program." I blinked. "Wait, you're 64. "Exactly," she said, smiling. "I've got something most of those young recruits don't, life experience. And someone's got to help families navigate the mess that financial crimes leave behind." It sounded surreal at first. My former mother-in-law training to become a criminal investigator? But the more I sat with it, the more it made sense. She'd already proven her moral compass when it counted. "So, does this mean you're leaving Oceanic Quest?" "Not leaving," she said. "Just expanding. Think about it. A dive center that also offers victim advocacy and financial crime consultation." Later that night, I called Olivia Diaz to talk through the idea of adding victim services to our business model. "Jack," she said, "you're building something rare. A business that didn't just survive a criminal attack. It turned around and became a tool for justice. That's not just impressive. That's powerful." After we hung up, I sat there quietly, letting that sink in. Laura's betrayal had almost ruined me, but somehow it had also helped birth something that mattered. Oceanic Quest Ventures wasn't just a dive company anymore. It was proof, solid, saltwater-tested proof, that honest people can take a hit and come back stronger. The marriage may have been fake, but what rose from the wreckage? That was real. 2 years after Laura's sentencing, I stood on the deck of our newest boat, appropriately named Quest for Truth, watching a new student go over her gear. She was nervous, but focused. That look you see in people who've been knocked down hard, but refused to stay there. Her name was Natalie Green. She was a marine biologist who'd lost her research grant to a romance scammer about 7 months earlier. She joined our support program, and now she was learning to dive as part of rebuilding herself. "Mr. Bennett," she said, fumbling with her mask, "I'm still scared I'll panic underwater." "Fear's not your enemy," I told her. "It keeps you sharp. The goal isn't to erase it, it's to learn how to keep going with it." Margaret came out from the cabin, holding Natalie's paperwork. She was 65 now, had graduated from the police academy and gotten certified as an advanced diver. Our little business now offered something you couldn't find anywhere else: underwater investigation services and victim advocacy, all under one roof. "Natalie, you're going to love this reef," Margaret said. "Jack discovered 3 new artificial ones just last month during a Coast Guard op. Funny thing about those reefs, they were built using materials confiscated from Daniel Mercer's old smuggling routes. Turning the tools of a crime ring into new homes for fish felt like the universe writing a little poetry of its own. As we slipped beneath the surface, I watched Natalie find her rhythm. With each breath, she calmed, found her balance. That's the thing about diving down there. There's no pretending. You either trust your training, or you don't make it. It's all real, all in the moment. After the dive, Natalie sat on the deck, eyes glassy. "I haven't felt that peaceful in months," she said softly. "Down there, it's like nothing else mattered. Just the present. That's why I do this," I told her. "The ocean doesn't care what happened to you. It only sees who you are right now." That evening, Margaret and I sat down to go through applications for our new fellowship program, free dive instruction, and business mentorship for victims of financial crime. 44 applicants this month, she said, her eyes wide. "Jack, we're really changing lives." I shook my head. "They're the ones doing the heavy lifting. We're just handing them the tools." Right then, my phone buzzed. Text from Agent DS. "Jack, the Mercer Network trial in Florida led to 15 more convictions. Your testimony sealed it. Thank you for staying the course." I set my phone down and leaned back, thinking about how far things had come. Just 2 years ago, I was a broken man discovering my marriage had been a lie. Now, I was running a company that helped others rebuild while partnering with law enforcement on serious investigations. The doorbell rang. Margaret answered it and came back with a thick envelope. "It's from the State Attorney General's office," she said. Inside was a letter of commendation, official recognition for Oceanic Quest Ventures' service in fighting organized crime and supporting victims. Margaret pointed to the bottom. "They're recommending us for a federal contract. Justice Department." I stared at the paper, thought about the long road that brought us here. How pain, if faced head-on, can become purpose. "Margaret," I asked quietly, "do you ever regret helping me take Laura down?" She looked right at me. Same calm, unwavering gaze that carried me through the worst nights. "Jack," she said, "I regret that my daughter became someone who needed to be exposed. But I'll never regret doing the right thing." As the last light faded over the harbor, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: solid ground. Certainty. Not just in the people beside me, but in the work we'd chosen. The ocean had taught me that trust, like diving, takes guts, preparation, and the willingness to go deep. But when you've got the right people and the right mission, the depths aren't something to fear. They're where discovery begins.